The marble floor beneath my knees was cold, even through the thick fabric of my uniform. I scrubbed at a wine stain on the Persian rug in Declan Sullivan's study, my movements practiced and efficient after 2 years of working in this mansion. The scent of lemon polish mixed with the lingering aroma of his cologne, that expensive blend of sandalwood and something darker I could never quite identify. "You missed a spot." His voice made me pause, though I didn't look up. I'd learned early on that direct eye contact with Declan Sullivan was dangerous, not because he was cruel, but because of the way his steel-gray eyes seemed to see through every carefully constructed wall I'd built around myself. "I'll get it, Mr. Sullivan," I replied, keeping my tone neutral and professional. "It's Sunday evening, Elena. You're the only staff member who insists on working weekends." I finally glanced up, catching sight of him leaning against his mahogany desk, arms crossed over his chest. He'd loosened his tie, the first 3 buttons of his white shirt undone, revealing the strong column of his throat. At 34, Declan Sullivan commanded an empire built on shadows and whispers. Yet in this moment, with the evening light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him, he looked almost ordinary. Almost. "The stain won't clean itself, sir," I said, returning my attention to the rug. "Mrs. Chen could handle it tomorrow." "Mrs. Chen has arthritis. I don't mind." Silence stretched between us, thick with something I refused to acknowledge. This was how it always went, these careful exchanges that revealed nothing while somehow saying everything. I'd become an expert at the dance, at maintaining the exact distance required between employer and employee, between the most feared man in Milan and the woman who cleaned his floors. "You're stubborn," he observed, and I could hear the faint amusement in his voice. "I prefer dedicated." "Of course you do." I finished with the stain, gathering my supplies with practiced efficiency. As I stood, I smoothed down my black uniform dress, the one I'd purchased myself because the provided uniforms never fit quite right. I'd learned to take pride in small things, in the details I could control. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Sullivan?" He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. This was another skill I'd mastered over 2 years, not flinching under his scrutiny, not letting him see how my pulse quickened when he looked at me like that, as if he were solving a puzzle only he could see. "No, that's all for tonight." I nodded and turned toward the door. "Elena." I paused, my hand on the brass doorknob. "Yes, sir?" "You work too hard." The unexpected comment made something twist in my chest. I kept my back to him, knowing that if I turned around, if I met his eyes, something might shift between us in a way neither of us could take back. "Someone has to maintain standards in this house, Mr. Sullivan." I left before he could respond, my footsteps echoing on the marble floors as I made my way through the mansion's labyrinthine hallways. Only when I reached the safety of the staff quarters did I allow myself to lean against the wall and take a deep breath. 2 years. 730 days of maintaining this careful distance, of pretending that Declan Sullivan was just another employer, that I didn't notice the way his gaze followed me when he thought I wasn't looking, that I didn't lie awake at night in my small room above the garage, wondering what it would be like to cross the invisible line between us. But I knew better. Women like me, we didn't end up with men like him. We cleaned their houses and pressed their shirts and disappeared into the background of their important lives. That was the natural order of things, and I'd made peace with it. Or so I told myself. The next morning arrived with Milan's typical autumn chill. I was up before dawn, as always, preparing breakfast for the household staff. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, shuffled into the kitchen, her weathered face creasing into a warm smile when she saw the coffee already brewing. "Elena, you're too good to us," she said, in her heavily accented Italian, settling into a chair with a grateful sigh. "Just doing my job," I replied, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter to her. "Your job is cleaning, not cooking." My grandmother taught me that taking care of people is always the job, no matter what it says on the contract. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. She was the only person in this house who knew anything about my past, about the grandmother who'd raised me after my parents died, about the scholarship I'd lost when she fell ill, about the mountain of medical debt that had led me here, to this mansion, to this life. You have a good heart, child. Too good for this place. I didn't respond, focusing instead on plating scrambled eggs and toast. The other staff members began filtering in. Marco, the groundskeeper. Isabella, the young maid who'd started last month. Ronan, Declan's driver and head of security, whose scarred knuckles and flat stare reminded everyone exactly what kind of business Declan Sullivan really ran. "Morning, Elena," Ronan said, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man of his size. "Boss wants to see you in his office after breakfast." My hand stilled on the spatula. Did he say why? Just that it was important. Mrs. Chen shot me a concerned look, but I kept my expression neutral. In 2 years, Declan had never summoned me to his office. Our interactions were limited to brief exchanges when he found me working. Nothing more. "I'll head up after I finish here," I said, proud of how steady my voice remained. An hour later, I stood outside Declan's office, my stomach tight with apprehension I refused to name. I knocked twice, firm and professional. "Come in." He sat behind his desk, a wall of glass windows behind him, showcasing the sprawling gardens I spent hours maintaining. He looked up from whatever document he'd been studying, and something flickered across his face, too quick for me to identify. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Sullivan?" "Sit down, Elena." I perched on the edge of the leather chair across from his desk, my posture straight, hands folded in my lap. The same way I'd sat through every job interview, every meeting with hospital administrators about my grandmother's bills, every moment when I'd had to appear stronger than I felt. "I've been reviewing the household accounts," he began, his tone businesslike. "You've been here 2 years." "Yes, sir." "You've never taken a sick day, never been late, never requested time off." I waited, unsure where this was going. "Mrs. Chen tells me you often work on your days off, that you help the other staff with their duties." "I don't mind, sir. I prefer to stay busy." His jaw tightened slightly, a telltale sign I'd learned to read. Declan Sullivan, feared by half of Milan, was irritated. "That's not the point. You're entitled to time off, to a life outside these walls. I have everything I need here." The words hung between us, honest in a way I hadn't intended. His eyes narrowed, studying me with that intensity that made my breath catch. "Do you?" The question felt loaded, dangerous. I met his gaze directly for the first time since entering his office. "Yes, Mr. Sullivan, I do." We stared at each other, the air between us crackling with unspoken words, unacknowledged tension. Finally, he broke eye contact, shuffling papers on his desk with more force than necessary. "I'm giving you a raise. 20%, effective immediately." I blinked, stunned. "Sir, that's not necessary. It's overdue. You do the work of 3 people and you're paid for 1. His tone brooked no argument. "Consider it done." "Thank you," I managed, though the words felt inadequate. "And Elena?" He looked up again, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Take a day off. Go somewhere. Do something for yourself." I nodded and stood, recognizing a dismissal when I heard one. But as I reached the door, some reckless impulse made me turn back. "Mr. Sullivan?" "Yes?" "Why do you care whether I take days off or not?" The question surprised us both. For a moment, Declan's carefully controlled expression slipped, revealing something raw and unguarded. Then the mask was back in place, smooth and impenetrable. "Because every employee deserves basic considerations. That's all." I nodded slowly, not believing him for a second, but understanding that this was as close to honesty as we'd get. "Of course, sir. Thank you for the raise." I left before he could see the small smile that tugged at my lips. Something had shifted. Some invisible boundary had been tested. I didn't know what it meant, but I felt it like a change in air pressure before a storm. That evening, as I organized the library, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know it was him. I'd learned to recognize his presence, the way the air seemed to change when Declan entered a room. "Working late again," he observed. "The books don't shelve themselves. They could wait until morning. I prefer to finish what I start." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell that damn cologne, close enough that every nerve in my body went on high alert. But I continued my work, sliding volumes back into their proper places with steady hands. "You never talk about yourself," he said quietly. "In 2 years, I've learned almost nothing about you." "There's nothing interesting to tell, Mr. Sullivan." "I doubt that." I finally turned to face him, keeping my expression neutral despite the way my heart hammered against my ribs. "With respect, sir, my personal life isn't relevant to my job performance. And if I'm asking as something other than your employer?" The question stole the air from my lungs. We stood there, barely 2 feet apart, in the golden glow of the library's antique lamps. For the first time in 2 years, I allowed myself to really look at him, to see beyond the tailored suits and commanding presence to the man underneath. And what I saw terrified me. Because Declan Sullivan, the man who'd built an empire on fear and loyalty, who could destroy lives with a phone call, who commanded absolute power, was looking at me like I was something precious and breakable and utterly out of reach. "Then I'd say you're asking questions that can't be answered, sir." Something flickered in his eyes, hurt perhaps, or frustration. "Why not?" "Because you know why." The honesty surprised us both. We stared at each other, all our carefully maintained pretenses crumbling in the space of a heartbeat. "Elena, I should finish up here," I interrupted, turning back to the books before I could do something catastrophically stupid. "Good night, Mr. Sullivan." He didn't move for a long moment. I could feel his gaze on me, could sense the words he wanted to say hovering in the air between us. But finally, his footsteps retreated, leaving me alone with my racing heart and the books that suddenly seemed impossible to shelve. I sagged against the bookcase, pressing my forehead against the cool leather spines. This couldn't continue. Something had to give. Some line had to be drawn and firmly maintained. Because the alternative, allowing myself to acknowledge what simmered beneath every interaction, every glance, every carefully neutral word, would destroy the fragile balance I'd worked so hard to maintain. Declan Sullivan could never be mine, and I could never be his. That was simply how the world worked. I repeated it to myself like a mantra as I finished in the library, as I walked back to my small room, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. But I didn't believe it anymore, and that, I knew, was going to be a problem. 3 days passed in careful avoidance. I adjusted my schedule to minimize contact with Declan, timing my work to the rhythms of his meetings and obligations. Mrs. Chen noticed but said nothing, though her knowing look spoke volumes. On Thursday evening, as I was preparing to leave for the day, Sloane called. My best friend since childhood, she was one of the few connections I maintained to my life before the mansion. "You sound tired," she observed after I answered. "Long week," I replied, gathering my coat from the staff room. "Come out with me Friday night. There's a new wine bar in the city center. You need to remember what fun feels like." I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to venture into Declan's world, the nightlife he controlled through silent partnerships and strategic investments. But Sloane's hopeful tone made me reconsider. "Actually, I have plans Friday night," I heard myself say. Really? Since when do you have plans? Since right now, I thought, but didn't say. I'm going on a date. The lie came easily, surprising me with its smoothness. I wasn't sure why I said it. What reckless impulse had prompted the fabrication? Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I existed outside these walls, that I was more than Declan Sullivan's invisible employee. A date? Sloane's squeal nearly deafened me. With who? When did this happen? Why didn't you tell me? It's nothing serious. Just dinner with someone I met at the market last week. The details flowed freely, building a believable fiction. His name is Marco. He's a teacher. Very nice. Elena Harper, going on an actual date. I never thought I'd see the day. We talked for a few more minutes before I hung up, staring at my phone with a mixture of amusement and dread. What had I just done? The next morning, I arrived at the mansion to find Declan in the kitchen, an unusual occurrence. He typically took breakfast in his office, preferring to start his day in isolation. "Good morning, Mr. Sullivan," I said, setting down my bag. "Elena." He nodded, his gaze tracking my movements as I began preparing coffee. "I wasn't expecting you so early. I have a lot to do today. I'll need to leave on time this evening." The words were out before I could reconsider. Declan's hand stilled on his coffee cup, his entire body going rigid. "Leave on time?" he repeated, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes, sir, I have. Plans." The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive. I busied myself with the coffee maker, hyper-aware of his presence behind me, of the way the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "I see," he finally said. "May I ask what kind of plans require such precise timing?" I turned to face him, keeping my expression serene despite my thundering heart. A date, actually. If I'd slapped him, the reaction couldn't have been more pronounced. The color drained from Declan's face, his knuckles whitening around his coffee cup. For a moment, I thought I saw genuine pain flash across his features before his mask slammed back into place. "A date," he echoed flatly. "Yes, sir. I'll be back tomorrow morning as usual." "Of course." His voice was ice. "Your personal life is your own." "Thank you for understanding." I poured my own coffee, proud of how steady my hands remained. When I glanced at Declan, he was staring at his phone, though I noticed he hadn't actually looked at the screen, his eyes unfocused and distant. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Sullivan?" "No, that's all." I left the kitchen, allowing myself a small smile only when I was safely out of sight. Some perverse part of me wanted to see his reaction, wanted proof that I affected him the way he affected me. And I'd gotten it, in the rigid set of his shoulders, in the carefully controlled blankness of his expression. But I hadn't expected the sharp pang of guilt that followed, the uncomfortable awareness that I'd wielded a weapon I didn't fully understand. The day proceeded strangely. Declan, usually a constant presence in the mansion's daily rhythm, became a ghost. I caught glimpses of him, conversations cut short when I entered rooms, meetings that ran longer than scheduled. Ronan watched me with increased scrutiny, his flat stare making me wonder what, if anything, Declan had told him. By evening, the tension had become suffocating. I was in the dining room, polishing silver that didn't need polishing, when Quinn, Declan's second-in-command, appeared in the doorway. "Boss wants you in his study," Quinn said, his scarred face unreadable. "Did he say why?" "Just go." I set down the polishing cloth and made my way through the mansion's corridors, my confidence from this morning evaporating with each step. Declan's study door was ajar, and I knocked softly before entering. He stood by the windows, his back to me, hands clasped behind him in a posture I recognized as his thinking stance. The sunset painted him in gold and shadow, making him look like something carved from marble, beautiful and untouchable. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Sullivan?" "Close the door." I obeyed, my pulse quickening. Declan turned slowly, and what I saw in his face made my breath catch. Not anger, though there was that too, but something rawer, more vulnerable. "This date of yours," he began, his voice low and controlled. "Is it serious?" "I don't see how that's relevant to my employment, sir." His jaw clenched. "Indulge me." We stared at each other, engaged in some silent battle of wills. I knew I should retreat, should maintain the professional distance we'd so carefully cultivated. Instead, I found myself answering honestly. "It's a first date. Nothing serious. But it could become serious. Perhaps. And if it did?" He moved closer, each step deliberate. "If this person wanted more than dinner, if he wanted you in his life, then I suppose I'd have to consider it. Consider it." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You'd consider it. Why does this matter to you, Mr. Sullivan?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us had voiced before. Declan stopped mere feet away, close enough that I could see the storm brewing in his gray eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "Because it does," he said finally, the words seeming torn from him. "It matters." That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give. I should have left. Should have walked out of that study and maintained whatever fragile professional boundary still existed between us. Instead, I tilted my chin up, meeting his gaze with deliberate challenge. "Then I'm afraid you'll have to accept it, sir. Just as I've accepted many things about working here." His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I do my job. I keep my head down. I don't ask questions about the men who visit at midnight, or the phone calls you take behind closed doors, or the way Ronan sometimes comes back with blood on his knuckles." I paused, letting each word land. "I accept the reality of who you are and what you do. You can extend me the same courtesy regarding my personal life." The comparison clearly struck a nerve. Declan's face hardened, his posture shifting from vulnerable to dangerous in the space of a heartbeat. "That's different." "Is it?" "Yes." He stepped closer still, and now I could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "What I do, who I am, is necessary. This date of yours is, what? Unnecessary? Inappropriate?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "You don't get to decide that, Mr. Sullivan. You're my employer, not my keeper. And if I want to be more than your employer?" The words escaped before he could stop them, raw and honest and utterly transformative. We both froze, the admission hanging in the air between us like smoke. "You can't be," I said softly, though my heart was racing. "You know you can't." "Why not?" "Because I clean your floors, Declan." His name felt foreign on my tongue, intimate in a way that made him flinch. "I press your shirts and polish your silver and disappear into the background of your important life. That's what I am to you. That's all I can be." "You're wrong." "Am I?" I gestured around us, at the study filled with priceless art and leather-bound books, at the world he commanded with a word. "Look at this place. Look at your life. I don't belong in it, not the way you're suggesting." "That's for me to decide." "No," I said firmly. "It's for me to decide. And I've decided to have dinner with someone who sees me as an equal, not as the help who happened to catch his eye." The words were cruel, I knew, designed to wound. And they did. I watched Declan's face close off, watched his walls slam back into place with brutal efficiency. "Of course," he said, his voice arctic. How foolish of me to think otherwise. Mr. Sullivan, you should go. Don't want to be late for your date. I opened my mouth to respond, to explain, to somehow repair the damage I'd just inflicted. But the look in his eyes stopped me. Cold, distant, utterly closed off. Good evening, sir, I said quietly, and left before I could do any more damage. I made it to my room before the shaking started, before the full weight of what had just happened crashed over me. I'd hurt him, deliberately and effectively, and in doing so, I'd hurt myself just as badly. Because the truth was, I didn't have a date. There was no Marco, no dinner plans, no possibility of something real with someone else. There was only this lie I'd created, this fiction designed to test Declan's feelings, to see if the tension between us was real or imagined. And now I had my answer. It was real. Devastatingly, dangerously real. I sat on my narrow bed, staring at my phone, at the fictional future I'd constructed to protect myself from a truth I wasn't ready to face. That I'd fallen for Declan Sullivan somewhere in the past 2 years. Fallen for him, despite every reasonable voice telling me not to. Despite the impossibility of it. Despite knowing that women like me didn't get happy endings with men like him. A knock at my door made me jump. I opened it to find Mrs. Chen standing there, her weathered face creased with concern. Child, what have you done? I don't know what you mean. The boss has been in his study for the past hour, drinking alone. Ronan says he's in a dark mood. She studied my face. This has something to do with you. I couldn't meet her eyes. I told him I had a date tonight. Understanding dawned on her features. And do you? No. Then why? Because I needed to know, I interrupted. I needed to know if it mattered to him. If I mattered to him. Mrs. Chen sighed, reaching out to pat my hand with her gnarled fingers. Oh, child, you've been playing with fire. I know. And now? Now I have to see it through. I have to leave. To actually go somewhere. Or he'll know it was a lie. And when you come back? I don't know, I admitted, my voice small. I don't know what happens next. I left the mansion at precisely 7 o'clock, dressed in the one nice outfit I owned, a simple navy dress I'd purchased for my grandmother's funeral 3 years ago, paired with heels that made my feet ache after 10 minutes. Ronan watched from the security office as I crossed the grounds to the main gate, his expression inscrutable. I didn't have a destination in mind, so I walked to the small cafe 3 blocks away, the one I sometimes visited on my rare days off. I ordered chamomile tea and a pastry I didn't want, sitting by the window and watching Milan's evening unfold around me. My phone buzzed. Sloane, asking how the date was going. I typed out a vague response about it being nice, then set my phone face down on the table, unable to stomach more lies. What was I doing? This elaborate deception, this test I'd devised. It suddenly seemed petty and cruel. Declan's face haunted me, the way something raw and wounded had flashed across his features before he'd retreated behind his walls. I stayed at the cafe for exactly 2 hours, the minimum time a respectable date would require, then made my way back to the mansion. The autumn night had turned cold, and I wrapped my thin coat tighter around myself as I walked. The grounds were dark when I arrived, only security lights illuminating the paths. I expected to slip quietly back to my room, to postpone whatever reckoning awaited until morning. But Declan was waiting in the kitchen. He sat at the counter, a glass of whiskey in his hand, still dressed in his work clothes, though his tie was completely gone, and several more buttons had been undone on his shirt. He looked up when I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and dangerous. How was your date? His voice was eerily calm. It was fine, Mr. Sullivan. Fine. He laughed, taking a long drink. That's all? Just fine? I don't think this is an appropriate conversation to be having. Answer the question, Elena. He stood, moving toward me with predatory grace. How was your date with this man who sees you as an equal? I lifted my chin, refusing to back down even as my heart hammered. It was perfectly pleasant. He was a gentleman. A gentleman. Declan's jaw clenched. Did this gentleman kiss you goodnight? No, that's none of your business. Did he? No, I said, the truth escaping before I could stop it. Not that it matters. It matters to me. We stood in the kitchen, the space between us crackling with tension and unspoken words. I could smell the whiskey on his breath, could see the barely leashed control in the rigid set of his shoulders. Why? I demanded, my own frustration breaking free. Why does it matter to you what I do with my evenings? You're my employer, nothing more. Don't. The single word was a warning. Don't stand there and pretend you believe that. It's the truth. It's a lie. He moved closer, and I backed up until I hit the counter. You know it's a lie just as well as I do. Mr. Sullivan. Declan, he interrupted. Say my name, Elena. Stop hiding behind formalities. I met his eyes, seeing the whiskey-fueled recklessness there, the vulnerability he'd usually kept so carefully concealed. This was dangerous territory, a line we'd danced around for 2 years but never crossed. This can't happen, I said softly. You know it can't. Why not? Because you're you and I'm me. Because I work for you. Because the world doesn't work that way. His hand came up, fingers gentle as they traced my jawline. I should have moved away, should have maintained distance. Instead, I stood frozen, barely breathing. What if I don't care how the world works? He murmured. What if I'm tired of pretending you're just another employee? What if I want... Don't say it. I pulled back, creating space between us. Don't say something you'll regret tomorrow when you're sober and I'm still the woman who cleans your floors. Pain flashed across his face. Is that really what you think? That I see you as just the help? What else could you see me as? As the woman who makes me forget to breathe when she walks into a room. The words tumbled out, unguarded and raw. As the person I look for first thing every morning. As the only thing in my life that feels real and honest and good. The confession hung between us, naked and terrifying. I felt tears prick my eyes, felt my carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. Declan, I know I have no right, he continued, as if afraid to stop now that he'd started. I know what I am, what I do. I know I shouldn't want someone like you, someone pure and good, and utterly beyond my reach. But I do. God help me. I do. You're drunk, I said, though my voice shook. I'm honest. He laughed bitterly. Perhaps for the first time in years, I'm being completely honest. I'm terrified of you, Elena. Terrified of how you make me feel, of how much power you have over me without even trying. I don't want power over you. Then what do you want? The question stopped me cold. What did I want? To continue this careful dance indefinitely? To pretend I didn't lie awake thinking about him? To deny the way my heart leapt every time he entered a room? I began, then stopped, unable to finish. Tell me about him, Declan said abruptly. This gentleman who took you to dinner. Tell me what he offered you that I can't. Why are you doing this to yourself? Because I need to understand. Need to know what I'm competing against. The raw honesty in his voice broke something inside me. I couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't maintain this fiction. Couldn't watch him torture himself over something that didn't exist. There is no him, I admitted quietly. Declan went completely still. What? There was no date, no Marco, no dinner. I met his eyes, letting him see the truth. It was a lie. Why? The single word was barely audible. Because I needed to know if it mattered, if I mattered. He stared at me for a long moment, and I watched several emotions cross his face. Confusion, understanding, anger, and finally something that looked like relief. "You matter," he said hoarsely. "You've mattered from the first day you walked into this house with your chin up and your eyes full of determination. You matter more than anything. Declan, I'm going to kiss you now," he said, his voice rough. "If you don't want that, if you need me to be just your employer, tell me now and I'll walk away. I'll never bring this up again." My heart thundered in my chest. This was the moment, the choice that would change everything. I could maintain my dignity, my distance, my carefully cultivated independence. Or I could take this leap into the unknown with a man who terrified and attracted me in equal measure. "I can't lose this job," I said finally. "The money, the stability, I need them." "You won't. Whatever happens between us, your position here is secure. I promise you that. And tomorrow, when you're sober, when we both remember all the reasons this is a terrible idea, then we'll deal with tomorrow." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "But tonight, please, just let me..." I kissed him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was 2 years of suppressed longing, of stolen glances and careful distance, of wanting something I'd convinced myself I couldn't have. Declan responded immediately, his arms coming around me, pulling me against him, as if he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. He tasted like whiskey and desperation, his lips moving against mine with a hunger that matched my own. My hands found their way into his hair, and he groaned, deepening the kiss until I forgot where I ended, and he began. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Declan rested his forehead against mine. "You lied to me," he murmured, but there was no heat in it. "I did. You made me think there was someone else." "I'm sorry." "No, you're not." His hands cupped my face. "You're not sorry at all." He was right. I wasn't sorry. Not about this. Not about finally crossing the line I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" He kissed me again, softer this time. "Now we figure it out together." The next morning arrived with the brutal clarity of sobriety and consequence. I woke in my small room above the garage, alone as always, but with the memory of Declan's kiss still burning on my lips. We'd parted after that second kiss, both recognizing that anything more would be rushing toward something neither of us was ready for. But the world had shifted. I could feel it in the way sunlight filtered through my curtains, in the accelerated beat of my heart, in the knowledge that I could no longer pretend Declan Sullivan was just my employer. I dressed carefully, choosing my usual black uniform, pinning my hair into its customary neat bun. External armor for the internal chaos. When I descended to the main house, Mrs. Chen was already in the kitchen, her knowing eyes tracking my movements. "You look different," she observed. "I look the same." "On the outside, perhaps." She handed me a cup of coffee. "The boss wants to see you in his office at 9. My stomach clenched. Did he say why? "No, but child, be careful. Whatever happened last night, it's changed things. You can see it in his face." At exactly 9 o'clock, I knocked on Declan's office door. His "come in" sounded strained, and when I entered, I found him standing by the windows, his posture rigid. "Close the door." I obeyed, my heart hammering. In the harsh morning light, last night seemed like a dream, something that couldn't possibly have happened between the feared Mafia boss and his housekeeper. "About last night," he began, not turning to face me. "If you're going to say it was a mistake, It wasn't. He finally turned, and the intensity in his eyes stole my breath. That's the problem. I waited, not trusting myself to speak. I've spent the night thinking about this, about us. He moved toward me, each step measured. And I keep coming back to the same conclusion. I want you in my life. Not as an employee, as something more. Declan, I know all the reasons it's complicated. Believe me, I've listed them all. The difference in our positions, the risk to you, the impossibility of keeping it private in a house full of staff. He reached me, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. None of it matters, not compared to how I feel when I'm with you. And how is that? I asked softly. Like I can breathe, like the weight of everything I carry gets lighter. His thumb traced my cheekbone. Like I'm not just the monster people whisper about, but someone who might deserve something good. The vulnerability in his admission made my chest ache. I covered his hand with mine, holding it against my face. You're not a monster. You don't know the things I've done. I know enough. I've worked here for 2 years, Declan. I'm not naive about your business. I met his eyes steadily. And yes, it scares me. The violence, the danger, the darkness. But I also see how you protect the people in this house, how you've never once treated me as less than human, how you carry the weight of hundreds of people's livelihoods on your shoulders. Elena, I'm not finished. I took a deep breath. I also know that getting involved with you could destroy everything I've worked for. My reputation, my independence, my safety. If this goes wrong, I lose more than a job. I lose myself. His face tightened with pain. Then we shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. The words surprised us both. Because the truth is, I've been falling for you for months, maybe longer. And last night when you asked me to be honest, I realized I was tired of lying. To you, to myself, to everyone. Declan's expression transformed, hope and disbelief warring across his features. You mean that? I mean it. I stepped closer, eliminating the distance between us. But I need you to understand something. I won't be your secret. I won't be the woman you hide away while presenting some acceptable face to the world. If we do this, it's real. Acknowledged. Done. And I keep my job. My actual job, not some fabricated position designed to keep me close. I need my independence, my own money, my own sense of purpose. Of course. And if it doesn't work, if we try this and realize we were better as employer and employee, you let me go. No threats, no using your influence to keep me here. Something flashed in his eyes at that. You think I would force you to stay? I think you're a man used to controlling everything in your world. I need to know I'm not just another thing you own. We stared at each other, the morning light harsh and unforgiving. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything that followed. You'll never be something I own, Elena, Declan said quietly. You'll be the one thing in my life I actually deserve to lose if I mess this up. Does that work for you? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Then we try this. Carefully, honestly, together. He kissed me then, gentle and reverent, a promise rather than a demand. And for the first time in 2 years, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, women like me could have happy endings with men like him. The next week unfolded in a careful dance of discovery. Declan and I navigated our new reality with the same precision we'd applied to maintaining distance. Public interactions remained professional, but behind closed doors, we learned each other. I discovered that Declan took his coffee black, but preferred tea late at night, that he read philosophy before bed, that he played piano when stressed, filling the mansion with haunting melodies at odd hours. He had a scar on his shoulder from a knife fight at 17, another on his ribs from a bullet wound 2 years ago. He counted in Italian when he was anxious and spoke Russian when he was angry. He learned that I'd wanted to be a doctor before my grandmother's illness derailed those plans, that I stress-baked at 3 a.m, that I'd memorized most of the books in his library during lonely nights, that I sang while I cleaned, though I stopped the moment anyone could hear. "I want to know everything," he'd said one evening as we sat in the library, me cataloging books while he worked on his laptop. "Every dream you had to give up, every scar, every fear. That could take years. Good." His smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges. "I'm counting on it." But reality intruded, as it always did. Quinn appeared one afternoon, his scarred face grave. "Boss, we need to talk about the Moretti situation." Declan's entire demeanor changed, the softness evaporating. "I'll be right there." As Quinn left, Declan turned to me, and I saw the wall slam down, the separation of worlds he maintained. "I have to—" "I know." I set down my book. "Go." He hesitated, torn between his two realities. "Elena, what I'm about to do—" "I don't need details," I interrupted gently. "I knew who you were when I agreed to this." Relief and pain crossed his face in equal measure. He kissed me hard, then left, and I sat alone in the library, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. That night, I couldn't sleep. I descended to the kitchen for tea and found Ronan there, his knuckles freshly split and bandaged. "You should put ice on those," I said quietly. He looked up, surprised. "It's nothing." "It's never nothing." I retrieved the ice pack from the freezer, set it on the counter beside him. "What happened?" "The boss needed something handled." "And Declan?" I tried to sound casual. "He's okay?" Ronan studied me for a long moment. "You care about him." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I do. He cares about you too, more than is probably wise." Ronan picked up the ice pack, pressing it to his knuckles. "You need to understand something, Elena. Men in our world, we don't get to have normal things. Normal relationships, normal lives. Everything we touch gets complicated." "I know that." "Do you? Because when things go bad, and they will, you'll be a target. Anyone who wants to hurt the boss will see you as the easiest way to do it." The blunt warning sent a chill through me. Has he thought about that? Constantly. It's eating him alive, wanting you while knowing he's putting you at risk. Then why? Because for the first time in his life, he's choosing something for himself instead of for the business. Ronan stood, moving toward the door. "Don't make him regret it." After he left, I sat in the dark kitchen, his words echoing. I'd understood intellectually that being with Declan would be dangerous, but hearing it laid out so starkly, understanding that my presence in his life made me a weapon his enemies could use against him, that was different. Was I strong enough for this? Could I live with the knowledge that every moment together might paint a target on my back? I didn't have an answer. When Declan returned hours later, I was still in the kitchen. He looked exhausted, a smear of something dark on his collar that I tried not to identify. He stopped when he saw me, wariness crossing his features. "Elena, are you hurt?" He shook his head. "No, I'm fine." "Good." I stood, crossing to him. "Then let's go to bed. Together." Surprise flickered across his face. "I thought after tonight, after what I had to do." "I know what you had to do, or enough of it." I reached up, touching his face. "And I'm still here." Something broke in his expression. He pulled me against him, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe, his face buried in my hair. "I don't deserve you," he murmured. "Probably not." I pulled back, meeting his eyes. "But you have me anyway." The following weeks brought a rhythm I'd never imagined possible. By day, I maintained my duties, keeping the mansion running with the same efficiency I'd always shown. But nights belonged to us, stolen hours in Declan's private quarters where the rest of the world faded away. He was tender in ways that surprised me, attentive to every detail of my comfort. He'd had a reading nook installed in his bedroom, stocked with books he'd ordered specifically for me. He remembered how I took my tea, the music I preferred, the way I liked to be held after we made love. Because we did, eventually. 3 weeks after that first kiss, I'd climbed the stairs to his bedroom and simply knocked. He'd opened the door, surprise and desire warring across his features. "Elena." "Stop thinking," I'd said. "For once, just stop thinking." What followed was tender and fierce, gentle and consuming. Declan worshipped my body like something sacred, his control slipping only in the moments of deepest intimacy. Afterward, we'd lain tangled together, and I'd traced the scars on his shoulder. "Tell me about this one." "Street fight. I was 17, thought I was invincible." "And this?" I touched the puckered scar on his ribs. "Rival family. 2 years ago. Got too close." "They could have killed you." "They tried." He caught my hand, pressing it to his lips. "But I'm hard to kill." "Don't joke about that." "I'm not." His eyes met mine, serious and dark. "Elena, there are things about my life, my business, that will always be dangerous. I need you to understand that. Need you to decide if you can live with it." I'd considered lying, offering easy reassurances. But we'd built this on honesty, and I wouldn't compromise that now. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Every time you leave for a meeting, every time Ronan comes back injured, every time I see blood on your shirt. I'm terrified." "Then maybe we should—" "I'm also stubborn." I cut him off. "And surprisingly resilient, and apparently determined to love a man who makes me worry constantly." He'd gone completely still. "What did you say?" "That I love you." The words, once spoken, felt inevitable. "I love you, Declan Sullivan, despite every logical reason not to, despite the danger and the complications and the impossibility of it all." His response had been to kiss me senseless, murmuring words in Italian against my skin that I didn't need translated to understand. Love, possession, promise, all woven together. But loving Declan meant witnessing the darker aspects of his world. One evening, I descended for water and overheard him on the phone in his study, his voice cold and deadly. "I don't care what excuses he has. He stole from me, and there are consequences. Make sure everyone knows what happens to thieves." I'd frozen outside the door, my heart racing. This was the Declan others feared, the man who built an empire on loyalty and terror. When he emerged and found me standing there, his expression shifted from cold to concerned. "You heard?" "Yes." We stared at each other, and I saw him brace for my judgment, my rejection. "What will happen to him?" I asked quietly. "Elena, I'm not asking you to change who you are, but if I'm going to be part of your life, I need to understand it. Really understand it." Declan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "He'll be made an example of. Nothing permanent, but enough that others think twice before trying the same thing. Violence. Yes. And you see no other way? In my world," his laugh was bitter, "mercy is seen as weakness. Weakness gets you killed. So yes, violence is sometimes the only language people understand." I absorbed this, trying to reconcile the gentle lover from my bed with the ruthless boss giving orders for punishment. "Thank you for being honest." Surprise flickered across his face. "You're not running? Should I be?" "Most would." "I'm not most people." I moved closer, taking his hand. "I won't lie and say I'm comfortable with this. I'm not. But I'd rather know the truth than live in ignorant bliss." He pulled me against him, holding me tightly. "You're extraordinary. You know that?" "I'm terrified," I corrected. "But I'm also committed." As the weeks passed, the staff began to notice the shift between us. Mrs. Chen had known from the beginning, her knowing looks and gentle smiles a constant presence. Isabella, the young maid, whispered to the others, spreading speculation that no one dared voice aloud. It was Quinn who finally addressed it directly. He found me in the library one afternoon, his scarred face unusually thoughtful. "The boss is different with you," he observed. "Is that a problem?" "Depends." He leaned against a bookshelf. "You planning to stick around, or is this just a fling?" "That's between Declan and me." "No," Quinn said firmly. "It's not. Because when you're involved with the boss, you're involved with all of us. You become part of the family, which means you become a potential liability. I need to know if you're solid." The blunt assessment should have offended me. Instead, I respected it. "I love him," I said simply, "and I'm not going anywhere." Quinn studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Good, because he's invested now. If you hurt him, it hurts the whole organization." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because loving a man like Declan Sullivan, it's not just romance and moonlight, it's blood and danger and hard choices. Can you live with that?" I thought about the nights I'd held Declan while he fought nightmares, about the scars I'd traced and the violence I'd glimpsed, about the fear that lived in my chest every time he left for a meeting. "I'm learning to," I answered honestly. Quinn's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Then welcome to the family, Elena. For what it's worth, I think you're good for him." He smiles now. Didn't used to do that. After he left, I sat among the books, processing everything. I'd crossed a threshold I hadn't fully recognized, moving from Declan's lover to something acknowledged by his inner circle. The implications were staggering. That night, I found Declan in his study, staring at financial reports with a frown. "Quinn talked to me today," I said, closing the door behind me. Declan's head snapped up. "What did he say?" "He asked if I was solid, if I was planning to stick around." "And what did you tell him?" "That I love you, and I'm not going anywhere." Declan's expression transformed, the worry melting into something tender and fierce. He stood, crossing to me in 3 long strides. "Say it again." "I love you." Again. "I love you, Declan Sullivan." I smiled against his lips as he kissed me. "Even though you're possessive and overprotective and occasionally terrifying." "Occasionally?" His hand slid into my hair. "I'll have to work on that. Don't you dare. I love you exactly as you are. Even knowing what I am, what I do. Especially knowing. Because you've never lied to me, never pretended to be something you're not." I pulled back to meet his eyes. "You're dangerous and ruthless and sometimes frighteningly cold. But you're also loyal and protective and capable of tenderness most people will never see. I love all of it." Something vulnerable flashed across his face. "I don't deserve you. A good thing I'm not interested in what you deserve. I'm only interested in what we build together." He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I felt the tension drain from his shoulders. We stood there, wrapped in each other, and for a moment the complications faded, leaving just us. "Marry me," he murmured against my hair. I went still. "What?" "Marry me." He pulled back, his eyes intense. "I know it's fast. I know there are 1,000 reasons to wait. But I don't want to wait. I want you as my wife. Want the world to know you're mine." "Declan, I know I'm asking you to take a huge risk, to tie yourself to me, to my life, to everything that comes with being Mrs. Sullivan." His hands cupped my face. "But I swear to you, I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. my heart hammered against my ribs. Marriage. To Declan Sullivan. It was impossible, reckless, terrifying. It was also everything I wanted. "Ask me properly," I said softly. Understanding dawned on his face. He went to his desk, retrieved a small velvet box from a locked drawer. Then, to my shock, Declan Sullivan, feared Mafia boss, dropped to one knee. "Elena Harper, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box, revealing a ring that stole my breath. A simple platinum band with a single perfect diamond, elegant and understated. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "It's nothing compared to you." His eyes held mine. "Marry me, Elena. Let me spend my life proving I can be the man you deserve." I thought about all the reasons to say no, all the complications and dangers. I thought about Mrs. Chen's warnings, about Quinn's assessment, about Ronan's blunt acknowledgement of the risks. Then I thought about Declan's smile, about the way he held me at night, about the future we could build together despite the odds. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'll marry you." His expression transformed, joy and relief washing away the vulnerability. He slid the ring onto my finger, then stood, sweeping me into his arms and kissing me with such tenderness it brought tears to my eyes. "I love you," he murmured against my lips. "I love you so damn much." "I love you too." We stood there, engaged, committed, ready to face whatever came next together. The morning after our engagement, I woke in Declan's bed to find him already dressed, standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low and tense, the conversation clearly serious. I sat up, drawing the sheet around me, and waited. When he finally ended the call, his expression was grave. "What's wrong?" He turned, his eyes softening when they met mine. "Business. Nothing for you to worry about." "Declan, we're engaged now. You can't protect me from everything." He crossed to the bed, sitting beside me and taking my hand, his thumb brushing over the ring that still felt strange and wonderful on my finger. "The Moretti family is pushing back on some territory arrangements. It's getting ugly." "How ugly?" "Ugly enough that I need you to do something for me." His eyes held mine, serious and intense. "I need you to go away for a few days. Somewhere safe. With security." Fear clutched at my chest. "You think they'll come after me?" "I think they're looking for leverage, and you're the most obvious target." His jaw clenched. "I won't risk you, Elena. Not for anything." I wanted to argue, to insist I could handle the danger, but the fear in his eyes, the way his hand tightened on mine, told me this wasn't negotiable. "Where would I go?" "I have a house in the countryside, about 2 hours from here. Ronan will drive you, and Quinn will stay with you until this is resolved." "And you?" "I'll handle the Morettis." His voice hardened. "They need to understand that there are lines they don't cross." I cupped his face, forcing him to meet my eyes. "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come back to me." "Always." He kissed me gently. "I will always come back to you." 3 hours later, I was in Ronan's car, watching Milan disappear behind us. Quinn sat in the passenger seat, his scarred face set in concentration as he checked his phone. "How bad is it, really?" I asked quietly. Ronan's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "Bad enough that the boss isn't taking chances. The Morettis have been testing boundaries for months. This is them making a play for more territory. And Declan? We'll remind them why crossing a Sullivan is a mistake," Quinn said without turning around. The countryside house was beautiful, a stone villa surrounded by vineyards and rolling hills. Under different circumstances, I would have found it romantic. Instead, it felt like a gilded cage, beautiful, but confining. The first day passed slowly. I tried to read, to distract myself, but every sound made me jump. Quinn remained a silent presence, positioned by the windows, constantly monitoring his phone. Ronan had returned to the city, leaving Quinn as my only connection to what was happening. When I asked for updates, he was frustratingly vague. The boss is handling it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give. On the second day, my phone rang. Declan's name flashed on the screen, and I answered immediately. "Are you okay?" His voice was rough, exhausted. "I'm fine. Worried about you." "Don't be, it's almost over." "What does that mean?" Silence stretched between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with something I couldn't identify. "Elena, there are things I've done, things I'm doing right now, that you might not be able to forgive." Fear clutched at my heart. "What kind of things?" "The kind that keep you safe, the kind that ensure no one ever threatens what's mine again." I closed my eyes, understanding what he wasn't saying. Violence, probably significant violence. The ruthless side of Declan Sullivan that I'd glimpsed but never fully witnessed. "I told you I loved all of you," I said quietly. "That includes the parts that scare me. Even when you don't know the details. Especially then. Because I trust you to do what needs to be done." His exhale was audible, relief evident. "I don't deserve you." "Stop saying that. We deserve each other." "I'll be there tomorrow. This will all be over, and we can start planning our life together." After we hung up, I sat on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the vineyards gold. Quinn appeared beside me, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. "You're good for him," he said, offering me a glass. "You said that before. I'm saying it again because it's true." He sipped his wine. "Declan's been in this life since he was 16. He's never known anything else, never wanted anything else, until you. He wants me? He wants the possibility of something beyond the blood and violence. You represent that." Quinn's scarred face softened. "Don't take that from him, Elena. Even when it gets hard." "I won't." Declan arrived the next afternoon, emerging from Ronan's car looking exhausted but unharmed. I ran to him and he caught me, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "It's done," he murmured against my hair. "It's over. You're safe." I pulled back to study his face, seeing the darkness in his eyes, the weight of whatever he'd done to ensure our safety. "Tell me. Elena. Tell me. I need to know." He sighed, leading me inside to the sitting room. Quinn and Ronan discreetly disappeared, leaving us alone. "The Morettis were planning to kidnap you," Declan said bluntly. "They thought holding you would give them leverage over me, would force me to cede territory." Ice ran through my veins. "What did you do?" "I made sure they understood that threatening you meant threatening everything they held dear." His eyes met mine, dark and haunted. "I didn't kill anyone, but I made it clear that next time, I wouldn't show the same restraint." "How? Do you really want to know?" I considered, weighing curiosity against the protection of ignorance. Finally, I shook my head. "No. I just need to know that it's really over. That we're safe. We are. I promise you we are." He pulled me onto his lap, and I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the tension slowly drain from his body. This was our reality, this dance between violence and tenderness, between the man the world feared and the man I loved. "When this is all behind us," Declan said quietly, "when we're married and settled, I want to try to be better. Not clean. I'll never be completely clean. But better. For you. I don't need you to change, but I want to. He cupped my face. I want to be the man you deserve, Elena. And that means finding ways to protect what's mine without always resorting to violence. That's a long road. Then it's good I have you to walk it with me. We sat there as the afternoon faded to evening, and I realized something fundamental had shifted. This crisis, this brush with real danger, had tested us in ways I hadn't anticipated. And we'd come through it stronger, more committed, more certain of what we were building together. 2 weeks later, we stood in a small chapel on the villa's grounds, surrounded only by the core members of Declan's organization. Mrs. Chen had made the trip, tears streaming down her weathered face as she watched me walk down the aisle. I wore a simple ivory dress, nothing elaborate or showy. Declan wore a dark suit, and when I reached him, the look in his eyes stole my breath. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional. But when Declan slipped the wedding band onto my finger, joining my engagement ring, his voice shook with emotion. I, Declan Sullivan, take you, Elena Harper, to be my wife. I promise to protect you, to cherish you, to be honest with you even when the truth is ugly. I promise to work every day to be worthy of the gift you've given me. When it was my turn, I held his hands tightly, looking into his storm-gray eyes. I, Elena Harper, take you, Declan Sullivan, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you, to love all of you, even the parts that frighten me. I promise to be your sanctuary in a world that demands so much from you. Ronan cleared his throat loudly, suspiciously emotional for a man so hardened. Quinn smiled, a rare expression that transformed his scarred face. When the officiant pronounced us married, Declan kissed me with such tenderness that I forgot we weren't alone, forgot everything except the feeling of coming home. The reception was small, held in the villa's courtyard under strings of lights. There was food and wine and laughter, a brief respite from the darker aspects of Declan's world. As we danced our first dance as husband and wife, Declan pulled me close, his lips at my ear. Do you have any regrets? I pulled back to meet his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, the fear that I might eventually realize what I'd signed up for and flee. None, I said firmly. Not a single one. Even knowing what I am, what our life will be, especially knowing, because I'm not naive anymore, Declan. I know exactly what I'm getting into, and I choose it. I choose you. Relief washed across his face, followed by something deeper, more profound. I love you, Elena Sullivan. The sound of my new name sent shivers through me. I love you too. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself on the terrace with Mrs. Chen. She took my hands in her gnarled ones, her eyes bright with tears. Your grandmother would be proud, she said softly. You've found happiness despite everything. I hope so. I know so. She patted my cheek. You're stronger than you know, child. Strong enough to love a difficult man. Strong enough to build a life in the shadows. Just remember to hold on to yourself in the process. The warning was gentle but clear. Don't lose who you are in becoming Mrs. Sullivan. I won't, I promised. As the night deepened and the last guests left, Declan and I retreated to the master bedroom. He'd had it prepared with care, roses on every surface, candles casting everything in soft light. How did you manage all this? I asked, touched by the gesture. I wanted our wedding night to be perfect. He came up behind me, his arms encircling my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. Wanted you to know that despite everything else, you're cherished, loved. I turned in his arms, reaching up to cup his face. I know. I've always known. What followed was tender and fierce, gentle and consuming. Declan worshipped my body like something sacred, murmuring promises against my skin in Italian and English, binding us together in ways that transcended the ceremony earlier. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. "What are you thinking?" I asked. That I never imagined I could have this. A wife who knows what I am and loves me anyway. A future that's about more than just survival and power. "You have it now. Because of you." He pressed a kiss to my hair. "You've given me something I didn't know I needed, Elena. Hope." I smiled against his chest, my own hope blooming alongside his. Our path wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, dangers, moments when the darkness of his world threatened to overwhelm us. But we'd face them together, building something beautiful in the shadows. "I love you," I whispered. "I love you too, Mrs. Sullivan." And in that moment, surrounded by candlelight and promises, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. Not the safe choice, not the expected choice, but the one that felt like coming home. We'd started as employer and employee, maintained distance for 2 years, then crossed every line that separated us. And now, bound by vows and choice and love, we were beginning the next chapter. Whatever came next, whatever darkness lurked on the horizon, we'd face it together. Because sometimes the most unexpected love stories, the ones that begin in impossible circumstances and overcome insurmountable odds, those are the ones worth fighting for. And I intended to fight for ours with everything I had. The months following our wedding brought a rhythm I'd never imagined possible. By day, I still maintained some of my duties at the mansion, though Mrs. Chen had taken on more responsibility, insisting that Mrs. Sullivan shouldn't be scrubbing floors. The title still felt foreign on my tongue, a beautiful impossibility that had somehow become my reality, but being Declan's wife meant more than just a change in title. It meant navigating a world I'd only glimpsed from the periphery, a world of power dinners and strategic alliances, of conversations conducted in coded language, and decisions that affected hundreds of lives. "You don't have to attend tonight," Declan said one evening as I dressed for yet another formal dinner. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching me struggle with the clasp of my necklace. "I know these events aren't easy for you." I turned to face him, taking in the sight of him in his tuxedo, every inch the powerful man the world knew him to be. But I also saw the concern in his eyes, the way he always gave me an out, always ensured I had a choice. "I'm your wife, Declan. Where you go, I go." He crossed the room, gently turning me around to fasten the necklace himself. His fingers lingered on my bare shoulders, warm and familiar. "You've adapted better than I expected," he murmured against my neck. "Better than you should have to." I leaned back against him, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "You warned me what this life would be. I chose it anyway. That doesn't mean I don't see the cost." His arms encircled my waist, holding me close. "The way you tense when certain men enter the room. The way you've learned to decode conversations most people would miss. You've become fluent in my world's language. And I'm not sure that's entirely a good thing." I turned in his arms, reaching up to straighten his bow tie, though it was already perfect. "What would you prefer? That I remain ignorant and vulnerable? I'd prefer you never needed to learn any of this. But I did need to learn it." I smoothed my hands over his lapels. "Because loving you means understanding your world, even the parts I wish didn't exist." The dinner that night was held at the estate of Antonio Russo, one of the old guard who'd worked with Declan's father. The villa was magnificent, all marble columns and Renaissance art, a monument to generations of accumulated power and wealth. I'd grown accustomed to the scrutiny these events brought, the way other wives assessed me with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. The former maid who'd somehow captured the heart of one of Milan's most powerful men. I was either a cautionary tale or an inspiration, depending on who you asked. "Elena, How lovely to see you." The voice belonged to Bianca Moretti, wife of the very family that had threatened me months ago. The conflict had been resolved through negotiation and strategic compromise, but the memory of that fear still lived in my chest. "Bianca," I replied, my voice pleasant and neutral, the way Declan had taught me. "I must say, you've settled into your role remarkably well." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "One would almost forget you used to work for the Sullivans rather than being one of them." The barb was subtle, but intentional. I felt Declan tense beside me, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on my waist. But before he could respond, I smiled, channeling every lesson I'd learned about power and perception. "How kind of you to notice. Though I must say, working for the Sullivans taught me far more about integrity and loyalty than any amount of inherited privilege ever could." The subtle jab landed perfectly. Bianca's smile froze, her eyes flashing with irritation. Several nearby conversations paused, people waiting to see how this would unfold. "Well," Bianca said, her voice tight, "how refreshing to find someone so unencumbered by traditional expectations." "I find it liberating, actually." I sipped my champagne, maintaining perfect composure. "Declan values honesty over pretense. It's one of the many reasons I love him." As Bianca excused herself with forced politeness, Declan leaned down to whisper in my ear. "That was impressive, and slightly terrifying. I learned from the best. I'm not sure whether to be proud or concerned that you're becoming so adept at this." "Be both." I looked up at him, seeing the mixture of admiration and worry in his eyes. "Because that's what I am, proud of who I'm becoming, and concerned about what I'm willing to do to protect what's ours." The evening continued with the usual careful dances of conversation and alliance. I navigated it all with growing confidence, the shy maid I'd once been, fading into a woman who could hold her own in rooms full of predators. Later that night, as we rode home in the car, Declan was unusually quiet. I watched him stare out the window, his jaw tight with tension. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything." He turned to me, his expression troubled. "Watching you tonight, seeing how naturally you've adapted to this world, it reminded me of what I've taken from you." "You haven't taken anything from me." "Haven't I?" His voice was raw. "You were supposed to save enough money to go back to school, to become a doctor like you wanted. Instead, you're learning how to navigate social warfare and decode power plays. That's not the life you chose, Elena. That's the life I forced on you." I reached for his hand, lacing our fingers together. "You gave me a choice, multiple choices. I could have walked away." "Could you have? Really?" He laughed bitterly. "I'm not sure I would have let you go, even if you'd wanted to. What does that make me?" "Human." I squeezed his hand. Flawed and possessive and sometimes frustratingly overprotective, but also mine. He pulled me onto his lap despite the confined space of the car, holding me tightly. "I don't deserve you." "Stop saying that." "It's true. You deserve someone who could give you a normal life, who wouldn't put you in situations where you have to defend yourself against women like Bianca Moretti, who wouldn't make you fluent in violence and strategy." I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. "Listen to me, Declan Sullivan. I don't want normal. I don't want safe. I want you, with all the complications and dangers that come with loving you. Yes, this life is hard. Yes, there are moments when I'm terrified. But there are also moments of incredible joy, of feeling more alive than I ever did before. Even when you're standing in a room full of people who see you as an outsider. Especially then." I smiled. "Because I have something none of them have. I have you choosing me every single day, not because of my family name or my connections, but because of who I am. That's worth every difficult dinner, every catty comment, every moment of feeling out of place." He kissed me then, desperate and tender, and I tasted the fear beneath his passion, the terror that he'd somehow broken something precious in me by bringing me into his world. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his. I need to tell you something. What? I've been working with Quinn on something. A project. Declan pulled back, confusion crossing his features. What kind of project? Remember how you mentioned wanting to find ways to be better? To protect what's yours without always resorting to violence? Yes. I've been researching alternative approaches. Conflict resolution strategies used in corporate settings, negotiation tactics, ways to maintain power without always using fear. I took a breath. Quinn's been helping me understand how these could be adapted to your business needs. Declan stared at me, something like wonder dawning in his eyes. You've been studying conflict resolution? For me? For us? For the future we're building? I traced his jawline with my fingers. You said you wanted to be better. I want to help you get there. Not by changing who you are, but by giving you more tools to work with. Elena. His voice broke slightly. Do you have any idea what you've just given me? A chance? I suggested. Hope? Everything. He pulled me against him again, his face buried in my neck. You've given me everything. That night, as we lay tangled together in our bed, Declan's fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. Tell me something, he murmured. Something you've never told me before. I considered, sifting through memories and secrets. My grandmother used to tell me that the most important thing in life was to never let anyone make you smaller than you are. That real strength isn't about never being afraid, but about choosing to be brave anyway. She sounds like she was an incredible woman. She was. She would have liked you, I think. Even knowing what I do. Especially knowing. She always said that a man's character isn't defined by what he does in the light, but by what he does in the darkness when no one's watching. I turned to face him. You've never hidden your darkness from me, Declan, but I've also seen how you protect the people who depend on you, how you've built a network of loyalty through respect rather than just fear, how you carry the weight of hundreds of livelihoods on your shoulders. That's who you are when no one's watching. You see too much good in me. I see the truth. You just don't recognize it yet. He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers still moving in soothing patterns against my skin. I have something to tell you, too. I waited, hearing the weight in his voice. The night before our wedding, I almost called it off. My breath caught. What? I stood outside your door for an hour, knowing that if I married you, there would be no turning back. You'd be tied to me forever, to my world, to all the danger and complications. His eyes met mine, vulnerable and honest. I almost convinced myself that letting you go would be the kindest thing I could do. What stopped you? Selfishness. His smile was self-deprecating. Pure, simple selfishness. Because the thought of living without you, of watching you build a life with someone else, someone better, it was unbearable. So I chose to be selfish. Declan, let me finish. His hand cupped my face. I chose to be selfish, and I've questioned that choice every day since. Every time I see you navigate a dangerous social situation, every time I watch you learn something you should never have needed to know, every time I see fear flash across your face when I come home late from a meeting, I wonder if I did the right thing. And what conclusion have you reached? That I'm still too selfish to let you go, even if it would be better for you. His thumb traced my cheekbone. But I promise you this, Elena. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you, trying to build a world where you can be safe and happy and still be mine. I kissed him, pouring every ounce of love and certainty into the gesture. When I pulled back, my voice was steady and sure. I wouldn't change a single thing. Not the fear, not the danger, not the complications. Because all of it led me here, to you, to us. And that's worth everything. His response was to show me, with hands and lips, and whispered promises, exactly how much those words meant to him. And as we lost ourselves in each other, I realized that this was what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale version, but the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of two imperfect people choosing each other every single day. The next morning brought an unexpected development. I was in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast despite Mrs. Chen's protests, when Quinn appeared in the doorway. "Boss wants to see you both in his study." Something in his tone made my stomach clench. "What's happened?" "Just come, please." Declan was already in his study when we arrived, standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. His posture was rigid, and when he turned to face us, I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Uncertainty. He ended his call and gestured for me to sit. I remained standing, my hand finding his. "What is it?" That was my contact in the prosecutor's office. He took a breath. "They're building a case. Against me." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I felt my world tilt, but forced myself to remain steady. "What kind of case?" "Everything they can make stick. Racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy." His jaw tightened. "They have an informant, someone close." Quinn swore softly. "Who?" "They wouldn't say, but whoever it is, they have detailed information about operations, transactions, meetings." Declan's eyes met mine. "This is serious, Elena. The kind of serious that could mean years in prison if they succeed." I absorbed this, my mind already racing through implications and possibilities. What are our options? The fact that I said "our" wasn't lost on him. Something flickered across his face, gratitude mixed with pain. "We fight it. My lawyers are already working on defense strategies, looking for ways to undermine their case." He moved to his desk, pulling out a folder. "But there's another option, one I've been considering." "What option?" He handed me the folder. Inside were documents, contracts, proposals for legitimate business ventures, detailed plans for transitioning his operations away from anything illegal. I've been working on this for months, since before we got married. He watched me read, his expression guarded. A way out, a way to build something that doesn't require darkness. I looked up at him, understanding dawning. "This is what you meant when you said you wanted to be better." It was always going to be a long process. Years, probably. But this investigation, it's accelerated the timeline. He took my hands. "Elena, if I do this, if I really commit to going legitimate, there will be consequences. People in my organization who won't understand, who'll see it as weakness. Rivals who'll try to take advantage during the transition. It will be dangerous and complicated, and there are no guarantees it will work. But it's a chance. It's a chance." He squeezed my hands. "A chance to build the kind of life where you don't have to be afraid every time I leave the house. Where we could have children without worrying about them being used against us. Where I could be the man you believed I could be." I set the folder down, my mind working through everything he'd just revealed. "You've been planning this since before our wedding?" "Since the night you agreed to marry me, because you made me want to be better, Elena. Made me believe I could be." Quinn cleared his throat. "Boss, we should discuss security protocols. If there's an informant..." "I know." Declan's voice was grim. "We lock everything down. No one gets access they don't need. Every operation gets reviewed. And Elena..." He turned to me, his eyes fierce. "You don't go anywhere without security. Ever. Not until we identify the leak." I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "What do you need from me?" I need you to trust me, to believe that I can navigate this without losing everything we've built. I do trust you. I moved closer, taking his face in my hands. But I also need you to trust me, to let me help. Elena, no. Listen to me. I held his gaze. I'm not just your wife, Declan. I'm your partner. Whatever we face it together. That means you don't protect me from the truth, and you don't make decisions about our future without me. Something shifted in his expression, pride mixing with love. Together, he agreed, always together. The investigation moved faster than anyone anticipated. Within 2 weeks, federal agents had frozen several of Declan's business accounts, executed search warrants on properties, and leaked carefully selected information to the press. I learned what it meant to be married to a man under investigation. The constant presence of reporters outside the mansion, the way former allies suddenly became unavailable, the suspicious glances from staff members wondering if they'd be implicated. Through it all, Declan remained outwardly calm, but I saw the toll it took. The way he worked late into the night with his lawyers, the lines of stress deepening around his eyes, the nightmares that woke him at 3 a.m. We need to talk, I said one evening, finding him in his study surrounded by legal documents. He looked up, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. About the fact that you're trying to carry this entire burden alone. I closed the door behind me. About the fact that you're making yourself sick trying to protect everyone while refusing to let anyone protect you. Elena, no, it's my turn to talk. I crossed to his desk, moving papers aside so I could perch on the edge. You've spent months planning a transition to legitimacy. You've built contingency plans and exit strategies. But you haven't once talked to me about what you're feeling. What I'm feeling doesn't matter. It matters to me. I reached for his hands. Declan, you're terrified. I can see it, even if you won't admit it. You're terrified of going to prison, of losing everything you've built, of leaving me vulnerable. His hands tightened on mine. Of course I'm terrified. If they succeed, if I'm convicted, you'll be alone. Unprotected. Every enemy I've ever made will see you as an easy target. So let's make sure that doesn't happen. How? My lawyers are already doing everything they can. I'm not talking about legal strategies. I slid off the desk, moving around to stand behind his chair, my hands on his shoulders. I'm talking about the informant, someone close enough to know details about your operations. We find them. We cut off their source of information. Declan reached up, covering one of my hands with his. I have people working on it, and I want to help. He turned to look at me, his expression torn between gratitude and refusal. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than sitting here waiting for the other shoe to drop? I moved around to face him. Declan, I'm not suggesting I go undercover or anything reckless, but I have access to the household staff, to the daily operations of the mansion. I notice things. Let me use that. Elena, please. I knelt in front of his chair, looking up at him. Let me do this. Let me be useful instead of just another thing you need to protect. He stared at me for a long moment, conflict clear in his eyes. Finally, he sighed, cupping my face in his hands. You're already useful. You're the reason I'm fighting so hard to build something better. Then let me fight beside you. If something happened to you because I allowed you to get involved, nothing's going to happen to me. You'll make sure of that. I placed my hands over his. But I need this, Declan. I need to feel like I'm contributing. Like I'm more than just the woman you married. He pulled me up into his lap, holding me tightly. You're everything. Don't you understand that? You're my reason for wanting to be better, my sanctuary, my hope. Then trust me to be strong enough for this. We sat there in the quiet study, the weight of the investigation and the uncertainty of the future pressing down on us. But we were together, and that made even the darkest moments bearable. Over the next week, I paid closer attention to the household's rhythms and patterns. I noticed who took calls in private corners, who seemed unusually nervous around Declan, who had sudden, unexplained wealth. It was Mrs. Chen who finally gave me the crucial clue. "That new girl, Isabella," she said one morning as we prepared breakfast together. "She asks too many questions." I paused in slicing fruit. "What kind of questions?" "About Mr. Sullivan's schedule, about who visits the house, about shipments and deliveries." Mrs. Chen's weathered face was troubled. "At first, I thought she was just curious. But now you think she might be the informant." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "I have no proof, just an old woman's instinct." I immediately went to find Quinn, relaying Mrs. Chen's observations. His expression darkened. "Isabella was recommended by someone in the organization. I'll look into her background more thoroughly." Within 48 hours, Quinn had his answer. Isabella wasn't just an informant. She was an undercover federal agent, placed in the household specifically to gather evidence. "What do we do?" I asked as Declan, Quinn, and I sat in the study discussing the revelation. "We feed her false information," Declan said, his voice cold. "Make sure everything she reports back is useless or misleading." "Or," I said slowly, an idea forming, "we use her to our advantage." Both men looked at me. "The investigation is focused on your illegal operations, right?" I continued. "Operations you're planning to transition away from anyway. What if we accelerate that timeline? What if we let Isabella report back that you're going legitimate?" Declan's eyes narrowed. They'd never believe it. "They would if we made it convincing. Real contracts, real business deals, real evidence of you shutting down the illegal operations." I leaned forward. "Think about it. If the prosecution's case is built on proving you run a criminal enterprise, but by the time it goes to trial, that enterprise no longer exists, what do they have?" Quinn let out a low whistle. "Old crimes with a statute of limitations, and a defendant who's demonstrably reformed." "It's risky," Declan said, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "The transition would have to be real. I couldn't just make it look good on paper." "So, make it real." I took his hand. "You wanted to build something better anyway. This just moves up the timeline." Over the next 3 months, Declan executed the most dramatic business transformation I'd ever witnessed. Illegal operations were systematically shut down, with employees offered positions in new legitimate ventures or generous severance packages. Contracts were renegotiated, partnerships restructured, and every aspect of the business was documented and made transparent. Isabella reported it all back to her handlers, exactly as we'd intended. And while some in Declan's organization resisted the changes, most recognized that their boss was finding a way to protect them all from prosecution. The toll on Declan was immense. He worked 20-hour days, negotiated with angry associates, faced threats from those who felt betrayed by the transition. But through it all, he never wavered. I supported him however I could, managing the household, handling social obligations, and providing the sanctuary he needed at the end of each exhausting day. "I couldn't do this without you," he told me one night as we lay in bed, both too exhausted for anything more than holding each other. "You'd find a way." "No." He pulled me closer. "Before you, I never would have tried. I would have fought the investigation with lawyers and intimidation, and probably ended up in prison. You gave me the courage to choose a different path. We chose it together." The day the federal investigation was officially dropped was one of the most surreal of my life. Declan's lawyers had successfully argued that with the transformation of his business operations, there was insufficient evidence to proceed with prosecution for ongoing criminal activity. The old charges couldn't be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, especially with Declan's expensive legal team poking holes in every aspect of the case. Isabella disappeared shortly after, reassigned to another investigation. I never saw her again, though I sometimes wondered if she knew how much her presence had catalyzed positive change. That night, we celebrated quietly at the countryside villa, just the two of us and a bottle of wine. "We did it," I said, raising my glass. "You're officially legitimate." "Mostly legitimate," Declan corrected with a wry smile. "There are still some gray areas. But the darkness is behind you, behind us." He clinked his glass against mine. "We did this together, Elena. Your idea, your courage, your unwavering support. This victory is as much yours as mine." I sipped my wine, feeling the weight of the past months finally lifting. What happens now? Now we build the life we always talked about. He set down his glass and pulled me onto his lap. Now we figure out what it means to be the Sullivans without the shadow of criminal prosecution hanging over us. And the people who were disappointed by your decision to go legitimate, the ones who saw it as weakness, are learning that there's more than one way to be powerful. His hand settled on my waist. Legitimate businesses can be just as influential as illegal ones. It just requires a different approach. "One I helped you develop," I said, unable to hide my pride. "One you created." He kissed me softly. "You saw possibilities I never imagined. You believed in a version of me I didn't know existed." I cupped his face, looking into the eyes of the man I loved, the man who'd transformed himself because I'd given him a reason to try. "I love you, Declan Sullivan. Every version of you, past, present, and future. And I love you, Elena Sullivan." The woman who saw a monster and decided to love him anyway, who turned a maid's determination into a Mafia wife's strength, who saved me in every way a person can be saved. As we made love that night, it felt like a new beginning. The darkness that had defined Declan's life for so long was finally receding, replaced by the possibility of something brighter. The next morning, Declan had a surprise for me. He led me to a room in the villa I'd never entered, unlocking it with a key he wore around his neck. Inside was an office, beautifully appointed, with a desk, bookshelves, and a view of the vineyards. "What is this?" "Your office." He gestured around the space. "I know you've been researching conflict resolution strategies, studying business negotiation. I thought you might want a place to continue that work." I turned to stare at him. "You want me to work?" "I want you to do whatever makes you happy. If that means working alongside me, developing strategies for legitimate business growth, then yes. If it means going back to school, pursuing medicine like you originally wanted, I'll support that too." Tears pricked my eyes. "You'd really support me going back to school? Even if it meant less time together?" "Elena, I fell in love with a woman who had dreams and ambitions. I won't be the reason you give them up." He pulled me close. "Besides, having a doctor in the family might come in handy." I laughed through my tears. "I can't go back to school. Not right now, anyway." "Why not?" I took his hand and placed it on my still flat stomach, watching as understanding dawned in his eyes. "Because I'm pregnant." The shock on his face was total. He stared at me, then at his hand on my stomach, then back at me. "Pregnant? You're pregnant?" "About 8 weeks. I found out yesterday." I bit my lip. "I know we never discussed children, never planned for this." He cut me off with a kiss so fierce it stole my breath. When he finally pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. "A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy?" He laughed, the sound breaking with emotion. "Elena, you've just told me we're creating a life together. A life that will grow up knowing only the legitimate business. Only the better man I'm becoming. How could I be anything but ecstatic?" I sagged against him in relief. "I was worried you'd think the timing was bad, with everything we've just been through." "The timing is perfect." He held me tightly. "This baby represents everything we've fought for. A future without fear. a family built on choice rather than obligation, a chance to do things right. We stood there in my new office, holding each other, marveling at the unexpected gift we'd been given. That evening, we told Mrs. Chen, who cried and hugged me, and immediately began planning nursery designs. Quinn offered his congratulations with unusual warmth. Ronan surprisingly smiled. Over the following weeks, as my pregnancy became more apparent, I watched Declan transform yet again. The fierce Mafia boss became a protective soon-to-be father, obsessing over my health, ensuring I had the best medical care, preparing the nursery with meticulous attention to detail. "You're going to be an amazing father," I told him one night as we assembled a crib together. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if I can't leave the old ways behind completely? What if our child grows up afraid of me?" "They won't be afraid of you." I took his hand. "Because they'll know you the way I know you. They'll see the man who chose to be better, who built a legitimate empire because he wanted his family to be safe, who loves their mother with everything he is." "You have too much faith in me." "I have exactly the right amount of faith in you." I placed his hand on my growing belly. "And so does this little one." The baby kicked right then. The first movement strong enough for Declan to feel. His face lit up with wonder. "Did you feel that?" "That's our baby, saying hello to their father." He knelt in front of me, his hands cradling my belly, his forehead resting gently against the swell. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your father, and I promise you, I will spend every day of my life making sure you never have to be afraid. That you grow up knowing only love and safety and the freedom to be whoever you want to be." I ran my fingers through his hair, my heart so full it ached. This was everything I'd never dared to dream of. A man who loved me absolutely. A child we'd created together. A future bright with possibility rather than shadowed by fear. "I love you," I whispered. "I love you too." He looked up at me, his eyes shining. "Both of you, my entire world." And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that every difficult choice, every dangerous moment, every sacrifice had been worth it. Because they had led us here, to this perfect moment of hope and love and family. The maid who'd fallen for the Mafia boss. The impossible love that shouldn't have worked but did. The transformation from darkness to light. It was all part of our story. A story that was still being written. One beautiful day at a time, and I couldn't wait to see what the next chapter would bring.